This video is designed for Year 12 computer science students who want to build up their practice and experience and confidence writing C# console applications, particularly focusing on iterations, so while loops and for loops. Today we're going to convert a Python program which lets the user type in a temperature, and it will let them type in 6 temperatures, and it will do some calculations with those numbers. So if we have a look at the Python program first, if we run it, it asks us to enter a temperature. If the temperature is too low for a human, so we normally expect something like 37, that's fine. But if you have something below 30 or above 44, then it keeps asking you to try and enter something valid. If you do type in something valid, so between 30 and 44, so let's say 38, it gives you a running total of all of those temperatures. I'm not entirely sure why, but it tells you whether or not the person has a fever. So if you're above a certain temperature, and then you can put in 6 readings, and it'll tell you how many of those readings a person has a fever. So it's kind of a program to look after someone if they're feeling ill, which seems a bit topical at the moment. So we've got the code in Visual Studio. That on the right hand side of the screen, and we've got a console application in C# on the left. So our job is to try and translate it. So this video is designed for people who've maybe got a bit of experience from GCSE at Python, and want to build up their expertise in C#. Okay, so we have 4 global variables in Python, and in Python you don't need to say what the data type is, but in C# we do. It looks like they are integers. So we put the data type and then the identifier, the name. We can select multiple lines and press tab. Remember, every line of code, every statement in C# needs to end in a semicolon. And they're underlined and grayed out at the moment because they're assigned a value, but it's never being used. But we will use them a little bit later in the program. Okay, so the topic of this video is all about iteration, which means either a for loop or a while loop. So we establish our variables, and then we'll use a while loop. Now in Python, you use indentation to determine how many lines of code will repeat. In C# we use the scope brackets, they're curly braces. In Python you don't need any brackets, but in C# we do need these parentheses, these brackets. So while hour is less than 6, what are we going to do? Okay, so in Python we ask a question, and then we convert the answer to that question into a float, a real value. So in C# we have to break that down a little bit. So we ask the question first, write, help the American keyboard layout. Control and Shift toggles between American and English layout if that ever happens to you. Enter temperature, and then we want to read from the console.read line, and we want to convert that into a float, and we'll use it as a double. So double temp equals, now that's interesting, they've got a floating point number. We allocated a integer variable, we declared an integer variable, so I'm going to change that to double. Double just means we've got twice as much memory to store twice as much precision, or more precision, than a float. So we've already declared this variable up here, so we don't need to say it's a double anymore. We're just going to assign a value, so we're going to set what's stored in temp. Now readline will ask the question. We can't convert the string that we get from readline into temp, so we have to do double dot parse and then pass that string that we get from console.readline as a parameter to double dot parse, so it converts it. Okay, next line, what have we got next? Then this is our validation. We've got a range check here to check and see that the value that the user types in is between a minimum and a maximum value. So while, put our Boolean expression in brackets. Boolean expression just means something that evaluates to true or false. And then we've got an OR, which in C# we use a logical OR comparator, a logical operator. So we're saying, is the value stored in the temp variable less than 30, or is it more than 44? If either of those are true or both of those are true, then we want to give an error message and keep looping round. So we're going to ask the question again, and we also want to give the error message. So the Python program said invalid temperature, please enter again. So that's what we'll put in here. Get rid of that one. Okay, good. So I'm using Control X to cut and Control V to paste. Right. So if the temperature is more than 37, then we have a fever. So notice this has to happen after the while loop. So the while loop will keep repeating until we get a valid entry, or it will keep repeating whilst the entry is invalid. So if the temperature that the user types in is more than 37, then the number of times that we encounter a fever increases by 1. That's what this operator here means. It means increase the value stored in this variable by this amount. So that confirms to us that fever should be an integer. It's good. It starts at 0 and increases each time we see a temperature more than 37. These lines of code aren't indented underneath if, so these happen regardless of whether or not the temperature is more than 37. So this is a different way of doing of increasing the value. We could have done total plus equals temp, but we're going to say total equals total plus temp. But at this point we've got an error, probably because we declared the variable total as an integer, and it should have been a double, because temp is a double and we can't add a floating point number with double precision onto an integer because some of the data will get lost. Hopefully that will fix this one. We need a semicolon on the end. Increase the number of hours by 1, and then we want to display the results so far. So console.writeLine, and press Control and space to fix the mistake in capitalization. It will try and autocomplete. Okay, so will this work? Probably not, if we've just got lots of commas in here. We'll probably have to do the concatenation ourselves. Let's have a look. So one error, just because we're missing a semicolon on the end, but I don't think it will display everything properly. We'll have a look and see. Sorry, it's probably a bit too small to see on the video, but let's see, 37, 37, 37. So you can see here it just says hour. It's not displaying everything that we wanted it to. So we're going to have to do the concatenation ourselves. Concatenation just means joining. So in Python, you can pass multiple parameters to print and it will display them all. But in C#, although there is a way to do that, we're going to keep it a bit simpler. So hour 1, total of temperature readings. So we need to put our own spaces in. So we're just going to put a space in here and a space in there. Let's put a colon in and a space. That looks okay. Let's try it. So 37 shouldn't be a fever. No, that's good. Let's try 40, which should be a fever, and then I'll just put all the rest in for 37. Looks like the total is adding up correctly, and it seems to have worked. Fab. But there's a little bit more that we haven't put in yet. So next we need to do an average. So it's the last of the code. We don't need that anymore. We can close that. And that was displayed outside of this while loop. So we had a nested while loop here, a while loop inside a while loop. This first one repeats 6 times for 6 different entries, data entries, and this while loop would continuously repeat until you type in something valid. So outside of this one that repeats 6 times, follow the dotted line down. Then we want to work out our stats for all 6 entries. Shift tab or tab to do the indentation in Visual Studio. Okay, so average. We don't know what average is. In Python, you can just use a variable. In C#, you need to declare it. Average is unlikely to be an integer. So you can declare it without defining it. We're just going to say it exists. We're not going to assign a value. We're just going to say it's there. Okay, we haven't got a built-in function called round like we do have in Python. We do have a library called math, and we can go inside the math class and use the round static function. Oops, we can spell round properly. And then as long as we use a semicolon, that should work. Console.writeLine. And again, we can't just separate values with plus, we have to concatenate, but it is quite useful that you can implicitly concatenate different data types. Average is a double, and this is a string, and it is possible to join them together without casting this to a string. In Python, you would have to convert a numerical value to a string before you can concatenate, but C#'s clever enough to be able to do that implicitly, which is rather nice. Console.writeLine. There we go. And then hopefully this will be it. Console.writeLine. This \n is an escaped new line constant, as in that's the escape character, and this is just a new line. So let's see, if we put in lots of 37s, the average should be 37. So I'm just going to put one in a little bit higher. So let's see, let's do some 30s. 30, 30, 30, and 40, 40, 40. And the average should be in the middle, 35. Yeah, good, with no incidence of fever, apparently. That looks wrong to me. Oh, because we didn't concatenate properly. Let's see. So if we go for 30, 30, 30, no fever, 40, 40, 40, there should be 3 incidents of fever, and it works. Fab. So things to take away from this: there's 2 ways to do indentation. Sorry, 2 ways to do iteration. This video is focusing on while. If you want an example of doing a for loop, then by all means suggest that, and we'll try and go through it. I haven't commented the code here because I've tried to explain it as we're going along through. Do get in touch to ask for questions or give suggestions on any code that you want converting, or if you've got just suggestions on something that would be helpful to go through a concept. All right, all the very best. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.